You know, the longer you live, if you're somebody that believes in God and identifies as somebody that's following Jesus, I think the way it's supposed to be is that the more that you care about the things that God cares about, and we're thinking about the people that are vulnerable in our society and need help, God kind of set it up in such a way that the people that are following him do his work. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today with our friend Christine Cender, who is here with In His Hands Orphans Outreach. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Jonathan.
What is In His Hands Orphans Outreach?
Well, we are a ministry that is based out of Central Illinois that has a heart for orphans and at-risk infants and mothers. And we just have a presence in Central Illinois and throughout the world.
So you're talking about different sorts of, and I guess it comes under the umbrella of orphan care. That's kind of a term that we use to describe what is orphan care, for example?
Well, within his hands, orphan care is many things. It is educating the public on ways that they can partner and support orphans domestically and internationally. We have an actual presence, an orphanage in Haiti that actually you can go and visit. I was there in January.
Really?
It was just a wonderful, wonderful
awesome.
place and compound.
So several different opportunities, whether it's here in the United States and here in the Midwest, or whether it's internationally. If it's something you're passionate about, it seems like In His Hands Orphans Outreach could probably get you pretty busy caring for these people that God cares about so much.
Exactly. An easy way for any person to connect. They don't have to go to Haiti, but we are a free service and ministry where we support and educate folk on how they can partner and support orphans.
Oh, we're going to find out a little bit about your story. What I've found oftentimes, maybe not all the time, but if you get somebody in on the radio or on a stage somewhere and they're talking about the idea of bringing hope to, kids who one or both of their parents is not in the picture. Usually it's not just a concept for people. Usually they're practitioners and they do it themselves. And I just have an idea that you might be somebody that has a little personal experience. So we're going to come back and talk with Christine from In His Hands Orphans Outreach. You are listening to WBGL. My name is Jonathan. Lindsay is not here. She's on maternity leave. There's somebody sitting in her seat right now. Her name is Chris. Good morning, Chris.
Hey, good morning, Jonathan.
So I used to think, before I became an adoptive parent myself, I used to think, man, whenever I meet people that adopt kids, they are just, they just seem like great people. They seem like people I would like to get to know. They have compassion. I used to maybe think that they were superheroes. Now I can't say this thing about adoptive parents anymore since I am one, but I still think that there are an awful lot of them that are just very much filled with compassion. You represent a ministry called In His Hands Orphans Outreach, but I was just wondering if you'd share your whole life story with us here today.
In 30 seconds or less.
Yeah, right.
Okay, here we go. Well, thank you. My husband and I were empty nesters. We've been married 45 years, and we were empty nesters at about 14 years. Someone at our church mentioned they needed a hosting couple for 2 children from the Philippines. They were teenagers. And so, long story short, I thought, I can hostess. We can go to restaurants. We could show them fun. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand really. It was very last minute.
Okay.
So having said that, they came into our home, and I realized it was more serious than that. We really wanted to try to have them meet prospective families. And as we were doing that, introducing them around, we fell in love with them. So we adopted them approximately 6 years ago.
Wow. And so you didn't necessarily bring them into your home thinking these kids are sticking around forever.
Right.
You were just trying to, like you said, be a good host, show them around, do things.
Right.
And when you got to the point where you this would look like it was going to be a, longer term or permanent thing, I mean, what were their ages at that point?
They finally came to us at 13 and 16, quite a bit older. That's unusual.
Okay.
From Manila.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so totally life-changing.
Awesome.
I mean, sometimes you hear people that you said you'd been, at this point, you'd already been married 45 years.
We are right now.
You are right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
right now. But this has been about 5 years ago, so almost 40.
What was it inside of you? Because I think, I don't want to say most people, but many people would say, well, that's a great opportunity for somebody else.
Sure.
What was it inside of you and or your husband that said, we could do this?
Well, that's great question. I was just chatting with Geraldine a little bit about why we're here. And when you walk with the Lord and love the Lord, and He is walking with you, what is important to Him matters more and more to you as you get older, and other things fall away, so to speak. So that's, in a nutshell, how Dave and I felt about this.
That is really awesome. That's a very good way to put it. I mean, the longer that you live, things that used to seem very important seem less important. Things that used to not seem very important now seem like this is a pretty big deal. And so, what is life like for you right now?
Wow, it's we chose to homeschool, and we're home educating. Our daughter Rose is graduated from high school and
Awesome.
is working and praying about where God would have her to go. She has finished 2 sessions with Youth with a Mission, and really herself has a heart for children. And John is about to graduate from high school, and we, Jonathan, are adopting again.
No way.
Yeah, we totally. Yes, Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah, holy cow. And so you're in the middle of this right now?
We are. We hope to bring the girls home at the end of May. 3 little girls from Colombia.
Huh.
Yepper Doodles. We hosted again last summer, and they had a great time and met different families. But again, we fell in love with them, and they really didn't want to leave. And so they just were a fit in our family with our grandchildren. We got grandchildren that are 20, 22, and on down.
Now, when does the movie about your life story release?
No. No time for that.
Or the reality TV show? I would love to hear more about that. But we're going to talk some more about the ministry that you have done this through and, advocate for yourself. In His Hands, Orphans Outreach, and Christine Cender is our guest today. Speaking of the joy of the Lord is our strength, it's sunny in many parts of our WBGL listening area today, and so we're just trying to have a smile on our face. It doesn't hurt that we have Christine Cender here with In His Hands Orphans Outreach. How did you learn to smile so much and so well? That's one thing I'm still working on. Oh,
well, hey, I blame it partly on being from Orange County, California, where there's a lot of sunshine.
Say no more. We're talking about this great ministry. It's called In His Hands Orphans Outreach. There's an event coming up we'll tell you about if you hang around with us, and we're just kind of sharing our stories about adoption and caring for kids that are vulnerable. So,
Jonathan, I've been really eager to hear your story. I've been told you have one.
Yeah, so my wife and I are adoptive parents, like we were just talking about. We have been foster parents now, I think, since about 2011. And my wife was a teacher in a public school, kind of a rough school district that she was a part of at the time. And she had foster kids in her class, and or just kids that were, she knew weren't being cared for very well at home. And she'd come home and say, I wish I could take these kids home with me. I wish that I could do that.
Right.
And of course you can't do that. And so she wanted to enlist us in foster care, where we could at least temporarily take care of kids going through these situations. And so she came home with the idea that we should do that. And guess what I told her?
Can't imagine.
I said, forget about it.
Yeah, right?
That's a great opportunity for somebody else.
Right.
And I said no to her for months. And I mean, she would continue to come back and say, for months, she would say, could we do this? And I would say no. I would point to, horror stories that you hear from things and, good foster parents being accused of things or, taking kids in that it's just a terrible situation. So I, for a long time, said no. And then one time, I was doing my kind of morning Bible reading and going through the book of James. You probably know where I'm going with this.
I think so.
And then there's chapter 1 at the very end of it, on verse 27. It says, pure religion, what it really means to follow God with your life is to take care of orphans and widows. And, to me, I sort of translate that just to mean those that are vulnerable in our society.
Right.
And so I later on told my wife, I'll do it. Let's do it. And, she kind of had to pick her up off the floor and all that. And then we started doing it. And long story short, we've adopted 2 kids. Now my son's 7 and daughter's 5 through foster care, and never really set out to necessarily I want to adopt. It was more my wife's heart that just saw it firsthand in her classroom, there is a need, and, she wanted to meet it. I got talked into it, and now we're kind of a team. And isn't it true, Christine, that there is a need, and sometimes we just hide from it, right? We don't look at it.
Yeah, it just seems overwhelming, and the mountain seems too big. When we decided we're called to adopt, I was told right away, when it's His will, it's His bill.
Yes, that's right.
Have you heard that before?
I have heard that before. I've always struggled with, how does that work? I mean, adoptions can be so expensive, especially if you're talking about internationally sometimes. But how have you found that to be true?
Well, absolutely. It has happened time after time. I see it all the time. It is true. And God provided for us. We really didn't have the large amount of money it took, but we were pointed to grants, many grants out there for adoption, a whole different world of help. Plus, the Lord brought along, right away, I shared with the Lord in my heart, I do not want to fundraise for myself. And He spoke to me and He said, okay. And so within a week's time, we had a mysterious, anonymous $13,000 amount donated to our first adoption, which was out of the blue and unheard of. So we are just so blessed. God is so faithful. He provides more than enough.
And we're talking about the idea that, you said if it's His will, it's His bill. I guess another way to say that too is that, like we were saying earlier in the show, that God, He uses His people to do His thing. So maybe He's using you to be the adoptive parent. He's using, I don't know, some rich guy to give you $13,000.
Yes.
And it all works together for God's help. So we're going to come back and talk a little bit about more, if your heart's kind of stirred, you want to learn some more about adoption. There's an event coming up you can attend and just get some more information at inhishandsorphans.org. Toby Mack, Keep Walking on WBGL. I'm Jonathan. Lindsay is off today for a while. She's on maternity leave, and we're talking about things like babies and orphans and adoptions and all these kinds of things. Sitting in Lindsay's seat today is Christine with a ministry called In His Hands Orphans Outreach. You just talked about being married, 45 years and with your husband, Dave. And now you're in the middle of another adoption that you're doing now, which is just incredible. Homeschool mom. I just wondered, people are hearing this morning a little bit about adoption. And could you just explain, if somebody is interested, how might they be able to at least look into the process and the subject with the ministry that you represent?
Well, thanks, Jonathan. I just realized I'm sitting in Lindsay's seat.
Yes, you are.
Oh, my gosh. I feel like I should move, but...
You have to have blonde hair to sit in that seat. That's the only way it works.
Congratulations, Lindsay. Well, I would love for anyone to ask any questions. They can email me at Christine@inhishandsorphans.org or send me a text at 217-390-3092. You also could go on our website at inhishandsorphans.org and check us out.
Yeah, definitely. There's an event coming up. We're going to talk about that here. But sometimes people don't even think to text or go online because they say, well, I literally don't know anything. All I know is I love kids. Maybe I've had kids, but God maybe wants me to adopt. But probably more people know about this than what I know, and so I'm almost embarrassed to ask the question. What types of questions do people ask?
Well, exactly what you're saying. How do I begin? What avenues do we have? What options do we have to pursue any type of orphan support? So that's why I asked for them to reach out to me at In His Hands or In His Hands Orphans, because We are a free ministry that loves to give folk the options of all they can do, from even attending a benefit or lots of ways to minister locally, or even a missions trip to Haiti, along with possibly hosting or adopting.
Now, does In His Hands Orphans Outreach primarily work in any of those areas, or is it kind of a mixture of, domestic adoption, which means in the U.S., maybe even in your own town or community, or internationally? Like, what do you tend to work with most?
Sure. We actually, all of them, that seems pretty blanket, but what we do in His Hands Orphans, we will come to a church and actually put on a seminar of all the different options that people have in the area of adoption or foster parenting. We are actually a service that we will do that to an organization or a church free of charge.
Awesome. And like you said, take the questions. What I would feel like is a pretty dumb question that I would ask. But anybody feeling that way, it's like, well, there are no dumb questions.
There are no small questions or dumb.
She just gave her cell phone number out on the air. You can text. Will you do it again one more time?
Sure. 217-390-3092.
Christine Cender with In His Hands Orphans Outreach. Tell us about the benefit event that's coming up.
All righty. April 5th, we'll have our first banquet in Champaign-Urbana, and it's located at First Baptist at Savoy Church, April 5th from 6:30 to 8:30. This is a free event, and it is a catered dinner, and we would love to have folk come out and hear about our passion for orphans and how they could find out a little bit more about In His Hands Orphans Outreach.
That's tremendous. And so you can get a hold of us here at WBGL if you want some more details on that. That's coming up here in less than a couple weeks.
Exactly. We've got WGNN Radio Children's Choir that's going to be entertaining.
Wow.
It'll be great.
You cannot go wrong with a kids' choir. I can't wait to see that. So that's going to be so neat. And for those that maybe that would be too far of a drive for them, is it possible to put on, like you said, I think you travel to certain areas and will put on events in local areas too?
Actually, yes, we will. We will come to you. So just reach out to us and we could talk and see what will work well for you. Beautiful.
Well, that's Christine Cender. Again, if you want to check out some details, it's inhishandsorphans.org, inhishandsorphans.org. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Jonathan. It was great hearing your story, too.
Great hearing yours as well.